Greetings, dear listeners. Today we're unraveling the truth behind the life of a medieval princess. When you hear medieval princess, what comes to mind? Perhaps you're imagining lavish feasts, grand balls, and elegant gowns, right? While these images are certainly appealing, they might not paint the whole picture. We're often fed a romanticized version of history that glosses over the realities of the past. Our aim today is to peel back the layers of myth and misconception, to reveal the authentic experience of a princess in the Middle Ages. We'll explore everything from birth and childhood to marriage and political alliances, daily life, and even fashion trends of the era. The reality might be less glamorous than the fairy tales, but it's no less fascinating. So, are you ready to step back in time and discover what life was really like for a medieval princess? Imagine the grandeur of a princess's birth in the medieval era. The arrival of a princess was an event of great celebration and anticipation. Castles would be filled with joy, the air thick with the scent of fresh flowers, and the sound of trumpets heralding the birth of a new royal member. The birth of a princess was not only a joyous occasion but also a moment filled with expectations. A princess was born into a world of power and politics, her destiny already shaped by her royal lineage. From the moment she opened her eyes, her life was destined to be a delicate dance between duty and desire. Yet, alongside this grandeur, the life of a newborn princess was fraught with grim realities. Medieval times were not known for their advancements in healthcare. Despite their noble status, infant princesses were not immune to the health challenges of the era. The specter of high infant mortality loomed large, casting a long shadow over the early years of a princess's life. Nutrition was another critical issue. While princesses were undoubtedly better off than their less fortunate counterparts, their diet was not necessarily a guarantee of good health. The food available in medieval times was far from our current understanding of a balanced diet. Lack of knowledge about vitamins, minerals, and proper nutrition often led to a variety of health issues. Healthcare, as we understand it today, was nearly non-existent. The understanding of medicine was rudimentary at best. Diseases that are easily preventable or treatable today were often fatal. Even a simple infection could spell disaster. Despite these challenges, princesses were seen as symbols of hope and continuity. Their upbringing was a careful balance of nurturing their delicate health and preparing them for the responsibilities that lay ahead. They were taught the art of diplomacy, the nuances of courtly manners, and the importance of maintaining their royal demeanor. The early years of a princess were a mix of grandeur and grim realities. From the moment of their birth, princesses were thrust into a world of power and politics, privilege and peril. Their childhood, though marked by luxury and privilege, was also a time of preparation for the heavy mantle of responsibility they were destined to bear. As the princess grew, her education and upbringing became of paramount importance. This was a time when knowledge wasn't merely an asset, it was a survival tool, a means to navigate the intricate labyrinth of courtly life. The princesses of the medieval era were considered the future matriarchs of society, and as such their education was a matter of great concern. The focus of their education was not just on acquiring knowledge, but on character molding and shaping them into the ideal image of a royal woman. Their curriculum was not similar to what we know today. It was less about mathematics and sciences and more about etiquettes, languages, arts, and managing household affairs. They were taught several languages, including Latin, which was the language of the church and the court. They learned music, embroidery, and dance, which were considered essential skills for a lady of the court. Moreover, they were taught the delicate art of diplomacy and politics. Remember, these princesses were not just royal offspring, they were political assets, potential queens, and sometimes even regents. They were expected to understand the complexities of royal alliances, treaties, and the subtle dance of power and influence. Their upbringing was also about instilling in them a sense of duty and responsibility. They were taught to be virtuous, gracious, and charitable. They were expected to be paragons of virtue, epitomes of femininity, and models of Christian piety. However, it wasn't all about being prim and proper. They also learned horse riding and hunting, which were seen as royal pastimes. These activities not only served as recreational outlets but also helped them develop leadership skills and courage. It's important to remember that this education and upbringing were not just about preparing them for their future roles as wives, mothers, and queens. It was about shaping them into individuals who could navigate the complex world of the court, who could stand their ground in a world dominated by men, and who could use their influence to bring about change. Education and grooming shaped the princess into a royal icon, ready to fulfill her societal duties. They were not merely ornamental figures, they were power players in their own right, educated and groomed to play their part in the grand theater of medieval society. Beyond the glittering jewels and lavish gowns, let's delve into the reality of personal hygiene and fashion. Now, if you're imagining a medieval princess taking a bubble bath with rose petals, I'm afraid you're in for a surprise. In reality, bathing was infrequent and often considered a health risk. Castles, even royal ones, lacked proper plumbing, so hot water was a luxury. Instead, they relied on something called grooming, which was essentially a good rub-down with a linen cloth. Perfumes and powders were used in abundance to mask odors, an attempt to keep up the illusion of cleanliness. On to the topic of fashion. Medieval princesses were expected to be the epitome of style and elegance. Dressing up was not just about looking good, but about displaying wealth and status. The more opulent your dress, the higher your standing in society. However, these fashion trends were not always comfortable or even safe. Gowns of heavy brocade and velvet were not only constricting but also a fire hazard. Corsets, designed to cinch the waist and create the desired hourglass figure, could cause shortness of breath and even deform the ribcage if worn too tightly. Footwear too followed a bizarre trend. The longer your pointy shoes, the more fashionable you were considered, regardless of the discomfort or difficulty in walking. Jewelry too was more than just adornment. It was an indicator of wealth and a means of carrying one's fortune. A princess would often wear her entire inheritance in the form of jewels. But again, this came with its own hazards. The weight of these accessories could cause physical discomfort and, in extreme cases, even injury. Fashion and hygiene, as we've seen, were a blend of elegance and discomfort. The life of a medieval princess was not just about the glamour, but also about navigating the complexities and dangers of hygiene and fashion norms of the time. Marriage in the life of a medieval princess was more than just a personal affair. It was a political strategy, a bargaining chip in the high-stakes game of power and territory. A princess's hand in marriage was a valuable asset, often used to forge alliances, settle disputes, and secure peace between nations. Arranged marriages were the norm. Love, compatibility, or personal happiness were secondary considerations, if at all. The primary goal was to ensure political advantages and strengthen bloodlines. As pawns in this grand scheme, princesses were often betrothed in their early childhood, and married off as soon as they reached the age of consent, which, in medieval times, could be as young as 12. Take, for example, the case of Princess Isabella of Valois. She was just 6 years old when she was betrothed to Richard II of England, a man almost 30 years her senior. This marriage was not about love or companionship, it was a strategic move to end the 100 Years' War between England and France. Similarly, Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages, was married off at 15 to Louis VII of France. Their union was designed to consolidate power and bring together two of the most influential territories in Europe. Such marriages were not without their challenges. Young princesses were expected to leave their homes, adapt to new cultures and languages, and bear heirs, all while navigating the treacherous waters of court politics. The stories of these princesses reveal the realities of medieval marriages. They were rarely about the individuals involved, but rather about the larger political picture. These unions were a means to an end, a way to ensure the continuation of royal lineages, the expansion of territories, and the preservation of peace. Marriage, for a princess, was a strategic move, often devoid of personal choice. It was a duty, a responsibility, and a significant part of what it meant to be a princess in the medieval era. Beyond the public eye, what did the day-to-day life of a princess entail? Let's dive into the intricacies of a princess's daily routine in the medieval times. A princess's day was ordered, disciplined, and meticulously planned out. As the sun rose, the princess would be woken up by her maids, who would help her dress in her elaborate attire. Mornings were usually reserved for private prayers and study. A princess was expected to be well versed in reading, writing, and the languages of court, such as Latin and French. She was also expected to be adept in arts like music and embroidery, which were considered suitable pastimes for a lady of her stature. After a midday meal, she might participate in outdoor activities. These could include hawking, a favorite aristocratic pastime, or perhaps a gentle game of chess in the castle gardens. However, these leisure activities were often overshadowed by her obligations and duties. A princess was not just a passive figure, she was an active participant in the functioning of the castle. She might be required to supervise the running of the household, oversee the education of younger siblings, or even manage the castle's accounts. She was also expected to be a model of virtue and piety, setting an example for the other ladies of the court. Social events such as feasts and dances were a regular part of her life. These were not just for entertainment but also opportunities for her to display her elegance and charm and to form alliances. The princess's day would usually end with the Compline, the last prayer of the day, after which she would retire to her chambers. Yet, even her sleep was not her own. If a guest arrived late at night, she was expected to rise and greet them, no matter how tired she might be. In all, the daily life of a princess was far from the romanticized ideas we often have. It was a life full of restrictions and duties, with only a few stolen moments of leisure. The daily life of a princess was a tapestry of rituals, duties, and a few stolen moments of leisure. Health and nutrition, vital yet often neglected aspects of a princess's life. The medieval period, with its limited knowledge of nutrition and health, presented a unique set of challenges for everyone, including princesses. Let's start with the food. The diet of a medieval princess was often far from what we'd consider healthy today. Meals were centered around meat, with vegetables and fruits often overlooked. This high-fat, low-fiber diet could lead to numerous health problems, including heart disease and digestive issues. The situation was further complicated by the lack of understanding about the importance of a balanced diet. Foods were often chosen for their perceived status, rather than their nutritional value. For instance, white bread, which provided little nutritional value, was preferred over the more nutritious whole grain bread, as it was seen as a food fit for the royalty. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the castle, inbreeding. Royal families often intermarried to maintain their bloodline and secure political alliances. This practice led to a higher chance of genetic disorders, which could have a significant impact on the health of the princesses and their offspring. Lastly, the medical care available at the time was, to put it mildly, rudimentary. Without the benefits of modern medicine, illnesses that we consider minor today could become life-threatening. The lack of understanding of germs meant that infections were common and often deadly. And let's not forget the mental health aspect. The pressures of court life, combined with the lack of effective treatments for mental health issues, could lead to a range of psychological problems. Life might have been royal, but health and nutrition were often compromised. It's a sobering reminder that no matter how glamorous the life of a princess might seem, the reality was often far from the fairy tale. So, what does all this tell us about the life of a medieval princess? Well, the truth is far from the fairy tales we've grown up with. A princess was born into a world of pomp and expectation, but life was fraught with danger and hardship. Infant mortality was high, and even if a princess survived her early years, she was subject to a strict regimen of education and conduct befitting her status. Her life was further complicated by the stark realities of hygiene and fashion. Contrary to the images of luxury and opulence, castles were not always the cleanest of environments. Fashion, while a status symbol, often bordered on the extreme, with harmful trends becoming the norm. Marriage, rather than being a romantic venture, was a political strategy. Young princesses were often betrothed to forge alliances, often without their consent. Everyday life was a mix of rare leisure activities and numerous obligations, all within the confining walls of the castle. Health and nutrition were yet another challenge. Despite their status, princesses often had a limited diet, and the impact of interbreeding and inadequate medical care could not be ignored. Beauty practices were dangerous, and the pressure to conform to societal ideals was immense. And while there were princesses who rebelled against the norms, the reality of marriage for most was far from personal happiness. It was a duty, an obligation, and often, a sacrifice. Unraveling the truth about the life of a medieval princess gives us a richer, more nuanced understanding of history. It reminds us that the past is not a monolith, but a tapestry of individual experiences shaped by the times they lived in. These insights challenge us to look beyond the stereotypes and myths, to delve deeper into the complexities of the past. They encourage us to question, to explore, and to seek the truth in our quest to understand history. The life of a medieval princess was far from the fairy tale we often imagine, and that in itself is a story worth telling. And with that, we've come to the end of our journey into the past. We've unraveled the myths and discovered the harsh realities of life as a medieval princess. We hope this has shed light on a part of history that isn't often explored. If you found our journey intriguing, we invite you to delve deeper. Subscribe to our channel and visit our website to uncover more untold stories from our shared past. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time as we unravel more historical truths.